Tonight, as national leaders take aim at the economy and promise to make life more affordable, the reality for millions of Americans looks very different. 8 years ago, the average paycheck went further. But since 2017, national data shows pay is up about 38%, while housing, food, childcare, and healthcare have risen even faster. And here in Montana, where housing prices grew by about 70% in 5 years, families say they're still struggling to keep up. So tonight, we're taking a 360 look at what's really driving this affordability crisis, why it still feels expensive even as inflation cools, and how these pressures are hitting Montana harder than most. Good Tuesday evening, everyone. Thanks for joining us tonight right here on Nonstop Local. I'm Ben Weinman. Tonight, as we mentioned, taking a closer look at what many are calling an affordability crisis, meaning things are getting more expensive faster than our paychecks can keep up with. And we're not talking about luxuries. We're just talking about the essentials that most families can't avoid, right? Housing, groceries, childcare, healthcare, like you just saw in that story. And even if you're working, even if you just got a raise, you may still be falling behind, but it's not your fault. And you're not alone. Most things now just cost more. In states like Montana, where housing and childcare are amongst the most expensive in the entire region, that gap is even wider. And folks, interestingly enough, wages have actually risen. Here in Montana, we've been one of the fastest wage growing states since 2020. So why does everything still feel so expensive? Well, those higher paychecks just haven't kept up with the actual cost of living in our state. State economists say the median Montanan wage still can't afford the median Montana home. So even though paychecks are higher than they were a few years ago, the cost of everything else has risen so much that families aren't feeling any real relief. And all of this sits inside a national economy that, on paper, still looks fairly strong. Unemployment holding around 4.4%. And economists expect modest but steady growth through 2025, and inflation nowhere near the peak that we saw back in 2022. But even with those positive indicators, most Americans say they don't feel better off. Recent poll numbers show a growing number of households report their expenses are outpacing their income, and nearly a third of lower income families say they are still living paycheck to paycheck. So that's where the real gap between what the economic data says and what families across the country and here in Montana actually feel. That gap is a central talking point today in the state of Pennsylvania. That's where President Donald Trump arrived just a few hours ago, using his stop to deliver new remarks on the state of our economy and across our country. Here's how the president described the current moment in Pennsylvania.
And now, after just 10 months in office, I'm pleased to report that America is winning again, Pennsylvania is prospering again, and I will not rest until this Commonwealth is wealthier and stronger than ever before.
And on Capitol Hill, Democratic leaders offering a very different take on the U.S. economy. Today in D.C., Minority Leader Hakeem Jeffries responded directly to the president's characterizations, saying many Americans are experiencing something far less positive.
The Trump Republican economy is not an A+. Everyday Americans are not confused about that. And if there's any debate as to the success or failure of this economy related to how it may be graded, the only question is whether the American people would give it a D for disaster or an F for failure.
And while national figures and political messages shape part of that story, the day-to-day impact is happening right here at home. Tonight, we're going to dig into the specific costs, putting the most pressure on families here in Montana. We begin tonight with housing. Nationally, home prices are up about 80% since 2017. Here in Montana, home values have jumped about 70% in just the last 5 years. Missoula homes now cost 8 times the local median income, and in Bozeman, even after prices have come down a little this year, the typical single-family home still costs around $750,000. Grocery prices today, they're up nearly 3% from last September, 18% higher than the pandemic, and they never reset back down, even as inflation cooled. Families are paying more for basics like meat, milk, produce, and bread. And in rural Montana, where many communities rely on long-haul shipments, transportation costs and limited store options push those prices even higher. For many households, the monthly grocery bill, it's one of the fastest rising pressures that they feel every week. And childcare here in our state now averages $25,000 a year for 2 young children. It's about a quarter of a typical household's income. The challenge isn't just cost. Nearly 60% of Montana counties are childcare deserts. We've done a previous 360 story on that issue. Check out our website, Nonstop Local. But hey, the bottom line here, there are far more children than slots available here in Montana. That leaves parents with long wait lists, higher prices, and fewer options. And for some, it even forces cuts to work hours or a full exit from the Montana workforce. Health insurance premiums, they are also on the rise. Since 2017, they've risen more than 40%. And out-of-pocket costs, those continue to climb as well. Many Montana families now face thousands of dollars up front before their coverage even kicks in. It makes routine care, unexpected emergencies, a significant financial stressor. For seniors and those on fixed incomes, rising medical costs are one of the most consistent sources of monthly pressure. So when you put all of those pieces together, the housing costs, the grocery bills, the child care, the health care, you start to see and feel why this is one big unified pressure on all of our families across Montana. Economists call it a, quote, stacked cost burden, where essential expenses all climb at the same time and even small increases compound on each other. That's exactly what is happening here. The price of homes surged. The cost of childcare, it's shooting up. Groceries reset at a permanently higher level, and healthcare has continued its long, slow, and steady rise. None of that, of course, happened in isolation. It all landed on households all at once. And so for so many Montanans, it means there's no single area to cut back on. Housing, of course, it's a non-negotiable. Childcare, it's a requirement for parents who work. Food, not an option. Healthcare can't be postponed forever. So even though wages in Montana have risen, they have not risen fast enough to offset years of rapid price growth in every major category of daily life. And that is why even with a national economy that looks stable on paper, people here in our state don't feel it because economic indicators don't measure what most families feel at the end of the month. There's a real difference between a strong economy and an affordable one. So tonight, the reality here in our state is clear. The cost of living is still outpacing what many Montana families earn. That's at the heart of this affordability crisis, not just numbers or charts, but real world decisions about housing, childcare, groceries, healthcare, the essential choices that shape how families live, how they work, and how they plan for their future. Folks, if you're feeling those pressures in your own household, we want to hear your story. You could be our next Help Me Ben. Hey, visit our website, nonstoplocal.com. Click on the Help Me Ben tab under News.